on the way to the hospital during a traffic jam. With my father suffering from a brain hemorrhage, I encountered my husband, a traffic police officer named Ethan, directing traffic. My mother wanted to beg him for help, but I interrupted her, decisively turning the steering wheel to take a shortcut. In my previous life, Ethan hesitated but eventually cleared the way for me, allowing my father to reach the hospital. That night, however, his childhood friend Lily, angry over his failure to answer her call, committed suicide by turning on the gas. Ethan appeared unaffected, even hosting a celebratory dinner for my father's discharge. But on that very night, he poisoned everyone's food. It's all because of you and your wretched father. If not for you, Lily wouldn't have died. You two killed her. You must pay for her life, he declared. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my father had fallen ill. This time, Ethan answered Lily's call without hesitation, rushing to her side. Yet somehow, he still regretted it later. The blaring horns of rush hour filled the air. My father lay unconscious in my mother's arms, his life slipping away. We were trapped at an intersection. Outside the car window stood Ethan's colleague, Logan, in uniform, his expression cold and unyielding. Everyone's stuck here. If I clear the way just for you, won't people accuse me of abusing my authority? What? Do you think you're some kind of celebrity trying to ruin me? Logan sneered. My mother, desperate, shouted. There's a life at stake in this car. What kind of police officer are you? 30 minutes earlier, I had found myself reliving this day, determined not to repeat my past mistake. I didn't ask Ethan for help. Instead, I forced my way through the traffic, turning onto a less congested side road. Before I could accelerate, Logan appeared, blocking my car. A life? I don't see one. Isn't your dad just taking a nap? What brain hemorrhage? He mocked. If you keep causing trouble and disrupting traffic, don't blame me for throwing you into lockup. Logan's disdainful smile pierced me. Around us, other drivers honked angrily, their frustration directed at me. Follow the rules, will you? We're all waiting here. Why should you get special treatment? One shouted. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, cold sweat breaking out on my back. Panic rose within me. Was my father going to die here this time? My mother's desperate cries mixed with hopelessness. She couldn't understand why no one believed her when her husband's life was hanging by a thread. Logan smirked maliciously. Your tricks won't work on me. Ethan already warned me about you. Just stay put and wait for the traffic to clear. Don't embarrass yourself. Or him. I clenched the wheel tighter. Logan was a good officer but had always treated me with hostility. I used to wonder why. Now I understood. He believed I had ruined Ethan's chances of success by forcing him to marry me, breaking up his relationship with Lily. But there was no time to explain. My father had been unconscious for too long. Every second wasted brought him closer to death. Suppressing my fear, I stepped out of the car and walked toward Logan. In my previous life, I had been just as desperate. Back then, I swallowed my pride, begging Ethan to clear the way. He had hesitated but eventually helped. My father received emergency care, and our family was relieved. But that night, Lily, furious that Ethan hadn't answered her call, turned on the gas and ended her life. Ethan later discovered she had been having a panic attack and had desperately needed his company. When he retrieved her ashes, he held them for 3 days, refusing to let go. 3 days later, he returned to his usual self, even bringing me flowers after work. I thought he had finally let go of the woman who should never have been part of our marriage. But on the day of my father's discharge, Ethan prepared a celebratory feast. Little did I know, every dish was poisoned. My father was the first to die. I tried to escape, only for Ethan to drag me by the hair back into the basement. He forced me to kneel in front of Lily's photograph. If not for you and your useless father, Lily would still be alive. Why did your father have to fall ill that day? Why did you force me to choose when Lily needed me most? Through my pain, I tried to explain. My father had only sought to help Ethan secure his promotion by asking an old friend for a favor. But his pre-existing condition and excessive drinking led to his brain hemorrhage. Ethan didn't listen. With tear-streaked eyes, he plunged a knife into my heart. Your family always looked down on me. Why didn't you just let me and Lily go? Lily's gone. Now everyone must pay with their lives. As I lay dying, he stabbed himself in the chest. Lily, I won't let you be alone. Only then did I realize he had never let go of her. Back in the present, I was still stuck in traffic. The side road was now jammed as well. Out of time, I took a deep breath and knelt in front of Logan. This is all my fault. My father is innocent. Please, clear the way and save him. I beg you. I pleaded, knocking my head against the ground repeatedly. The other drivers stared in shock as I cried. My father has had a brain hemorrhage and is unconscious. Please. He's dying. You're the only one who can help. Logan chuckled disdainfully. Ethan was right. You really will do anything for attention, won't you? Pain throbbed in my forehead, but it couldn't compare to the ache in my heart. Logan spat at me, his face full of contempt. Then, grabbing his megaphone, he shouted to the crowd, "Don't fall for her lies. There's no dying father in this car." Back in the day, she used her father, the bureau chief, to pressure my buddy Ethan into breaking up with his childhood sweetheart. She even threatened to ruin his career if he didn't comply. Now she's putting on this act just to cause trouble. I heard him call me a mistress ruining other people's relationships. The crowd gasped in shock, and soon everyone was casting disgusted glances at me. So it's true. She's colluding with her dad to fake this emergency. Isn't this just abusing public resources? Someone murmured. My heart sank. I never expected Logan to go this far. He wasn't supposed to be like Ethan, but his cold reaction confirmed my worst fear. Logan had likely also been reborn, just like me. Your dad can't hold on much longer. My mother's panicked voice rang from inside the car. My father was convulsing in her arms. I quickly stood, opened the rear door, and commanded, "Mom, loosen Dad's clothes and his belt. Open his mouth to keep him from biting his tongue." To calm myself, I slapped my cheeks twice, forcing my mind to clear. Following the emergency techniques a renowned doctor had taught me in my previous life, I immediately began performing first aid on my father. Fortunately, after a few tense minutes, my father stopped convulsing, though he remained unconscious. You really came prepared, didn't you? Logan taunted, crossing his arms and watching as though it were all a joke. But don't waste your energy. Ethan is with Miss Lily now, no matter what you do. He's not coming. Sweat dripped from my forehead as I finally began to understand just how terrible Ethan must think I was. I thought back to how we met. At someone else's wedding. I had accidentally bumped into him as he smoked by the entrance. He had helped me pick up my fallen purse. And later my father told me he was single. That was when I decided to pursue him. No one had ever told me his heart already belonged to Lily. I didn't understand. Was it so wrong to like him? The one at fault was Ethan. He shouldn't have accepted my love while staying entangled with another woman. Just then, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. My eyes lit up as I called out, "Dr. Reed, please help me." The man, also trapped in traffic, looked at me in confusion as I ran toward him. Dr. Reed, the doctor who had saved my father in my past life, was my last hope. Before he could respond, I grabbed his arm and pulled him to my car. "Please, save my father." Dr. Reed quickly assessed the situation and his expression turned serious. He looked at Logan, who stood watching with a smirk, and barked, "Officer, clear the way. This patient needs to get to the hospital immediately." Logan scoffed. "What kind of doctor are you? Pretending like this is an emergency? Stay out of it." Dr. Reed, visibly angered, snapped, "Do you even know who I am? Go ask around about Dr. Reed. Who would fake something like this?" He began examining my father's condition, but his words were sharp. "You'd better believe this is real. Every second counts." Logan hesitated for a moment, recognition flashing across his face. He must have realized who Dr. Reed was. After all, his photo was all over the internet. Still, he stubbornly said, "Even if you're a doctor, this woman isn't going anywhere." He then dialed Ethan's number, putting the call on speaker. "What is it?" "Logan." Ethan's voice came through the phone, and I involuntarily shuddered. The pain of being stabbed to death in my previous life still haunted me. "Ethan, I've run into your wife. She claims her father's having a brain hemorrhage, and there's a doctor here saying he needs to go to the hospital. Should I let them through? Logan asked mockingly. Ethan's laugh was cold and triumphant. Let her through? Dream on. Let that bitch and her family die right there. Lily's feeling unwell, and I'm staying with her. Don't call me again unless it's important. The line went dead. My mother's face turned red with rage and desperation. She wanted to curse but couldn't summon the strength, tears failing to come. What did we ever do to deserve this? She cried. Why is he treating my daughter like this? I felt dizzy, my vision spinning. Yes, I wanted to know why, too. Just then, Dr. Reed shouted, "Hurry! Save him!" Inside the car, my father suddenly began spewing blood, violently and uncontrollably. Logan, caught off guard, was splattered, his entire face covered in crimson. His expression shifted to one of terror. You idiot! Do you believe me now? Dr. Reed yelled, shoving Logan. Finally, Logan snapped out of his daze. This is serious. Someone could actually die. Logan muttered, wiping his face. He quickly turned on his siren, stepped into his car, and cleared a path for us. Everyone, move aside. There's a critical patient here. Following behind him, I felt a sliver of hope. Dr. Reed was already on the phone with the hospital, ensuring a team was ready for our arrival. When we reached the hospital, the medical staff rushed to the car, taking my father into the emergency room. As Dr. Reed changed into scrubs, he couldn't help muttering angrily, "This could have been done so much earlier. Why did we have to waste so much time? Are you out of your mind?" Sitting in the waiting area, drenched in sweat, I could barely process what had just happened. Nurses rushed in and out of the operating room, their trays covered in blood-soaked gauze. Why did you bring him in so late? He's been in this condition for so long. Were you hoping he wouldn't make it? One nurse scolded. Logan, looking embarrassed, tried to explain. I thought it was fake. Fake? Are you blind? The symptoms were obvious. How are you even a police officer? The nurse snapped before storming back into the operating room. I gripped my mother's hand tightly, trying to comfort her. Logan, meanwhile, frantically tried calling Ethan, but Ethan didn't answer. He's probably busy, Logan mumbled awkwardly. For once, he didn't try to justify Ethan's actions. The absurdity of the situation seemed to have left him speechless. I covered my face with my hands, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Logan seemed unsure of what to say, shifting uncomfortably. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he called out toward the corridor. Ethan, we're over here. The words I was about to say caught in my throat. I followed Logan's gaze and saw Ethan standing at the end of the corridor, carefully supporting Lily as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. Hearing Logan's shout, Ethan turned to look, his expression darkening instantly when his eyes landed on me. Logan, what's going on? Didn't I tell you to keep her from coming to the hospital? How could you let this happen? His words were directed at Logan, but his eyes were locked on me. Logan panicked. No, Ethan, I didn't let her through on purpose. Her father really has a brain hemorrhage. He even sprayed blood on me. Logan gestured at his stained uniform, his tone almost pleading. Ethan, however, remained unmoved. Spitting blood? Probably some staged blood pack. Logan, you're just too soft-hearted for your own good. The anger I had been holding back finally burst out. With a cold glare, I stepped toward Ethan. My father is in there fighting for his life. You'd better pray he survives. Otherwise, I'll make sure you regret it. Before Ethan could respond, Lily interjected in a soft, delicate voice. Sister, don't blame Ethan. I know you're just jealous that he came to see me and decided to stage this whole drama. But how could you curse your own father like this? She frowned slightly, leaning against Ethan. Ethan, I still feel a bit unwell. Ethan's panic was immediate and visible. Let's go find another doctor, he said, holding her hand as they prepared to leave. I trembled, my fury nearly consuming me. During our marriage, I had often felt there was someone else in Ethan's heart, but whenever I asked, he remained silent. It wasn't until one drunken night, when he clung to me, crying out Lily's name, that I realized there had always been another woman in our marriage. Lily had been part of his life since childhood. She went abroad for college after high school and only returned the year I met Ethan. Lily suffered from psychological issues, and during her episodes, she would cry and beg Ethan to come to her. Yet, when she recovered, she would remind him that he was married and they needed to keep their distance. Their relationship was entirely dictated by Lily, her invisible hand controlling Ethan. Time and time again, a single phone call from Lily would pull Ethan away from me. My nails dug painfully into my palms as I tried to steady myself. Just then, Dr. Reed burst out of the operating room, his expression urgent. "Where are the patient's family members?" I rushed to the door, my heart pounding. "Dr. Reed, how's my father?" He adjusted his glasses, letting out a deep sigh. "He's out of immediate danger, but he'll need to stay in the ICU for a few days for observation." Beside me, Logan let out a relieved sigh. Thank goodness. If something had happened, I don't know if I'd still have my job. He gave me an apologetic smile. "Sorry, sis-in-law. I really didn't expect things to turn out like this today." Leaning against the wall, I took a moment to process everything. Relief flooded me. My father had survived. In my past life, Ethan had refused to believe my father's illness was real. But this time, we had made it to the hospital in time. Thanks to Dr. Reed's expertise and my father's strong constitution, he recovered quickly. Ethan, however, still doubted. "Are you sure your dad wasn't faking it? How did he get better so fast?" he asked me one day, his tone laced with suspicion. Before I could respond, he forced a smile and added, "I'm just joking." But deep down, I knew he had never truly trusted me. He blamed me for forcing him into marriage, for my father's illness coinciding with Lily's call, and for disrupting his perfect image of life. Standing outside my father's hospital room, I turned to my mother and held her hand tightly. "Mom, once Dad gets better, I'm getting a divorce." My mother looked at me in shock but didn't protest. Instead, her eyes reddened with emotion, and she nodded. "Good. Leave him." Today, I finally saw Ethan for who he really is. Her voice trembled with anger and heartbreak. I forced a weak smile, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Just then, Logan hesitated before approaching us. He fidgeted awkwardly before finally apologizing. "Sis-in-law, Ethan ordered us not to let you leave today. I had no choice. I'm really sorry. He's just confused right now. Don't take it to heart." Despite his words, the pity in Logan's eyes was unmistakable. Everyone on their team knew Ethan didn't love me. Years ago, I had confessed my feelings to Ethan, but he didn't give me a clear answer, only saying he'd think about it. After learning I was the police chief's daughter, his attitude changed. He became warmer, his words tinged with flirtation, but he still refused to make any promises. Then, one night, he showed up at my door drunk, pulling me into his arms. His kisses landed on my face and neck, and I was too overwhelmed to resist. By morning, his expression was strange. Guilt, sadness, and a hint of resoluteness. At the time, I didn't understand. Not until I accidentally saw a hidden message on his phone. "Ethan, even if marrying that woman will secure your future, don't forget about me." That message confirmed my deepest fears. He had chosen me not out of love but for my status. We had a massive argument. Ethan knelt in front of me, slapping himself and swearing he'd love me wholeheartedly from then on. He even blocked Lily's contact in front of me. But as Logan later revealed, Ethan had turned around and told his colleagues I had coerced him into breaking things off with Lily. Because he didn't love me, everything I did was wrong. In the end, I gained nothing but the reputation of a villain. A week later, my father was finally transferred from the ICU to a regular ward. I finally felt some relief knowing my father was out of danger. But exhaustion from days without proper rest overwhelmed me. I stepped out of the hospital, intending to go home for a break. But before I could react, the world darkened, and a sharp slap landed across my face. "You filthy woman. Meryl," Ethan roared, his face twisted with rage. Before I could steady myself, another slap struck me, sending me tumbling to the ground. Behind him stood Lily, watching with amusement as if enjoying the spectacle. The nearby security guards quickly restrained Ethan, but his furious voice rang out. "You had the audacity to report me. Now I've lost my job. Are you happy now? Tell me, what has your useless father ever done for me?" Your family exists solely to ruin my life. The pain from Ethan's blows was overwhelming. My head spun, and I tasted blood in my mouth. Dazed, I finally understood. This was why my mother had been sneaking out recently. She must have reported him without telling me. Holding my bruised face, I struggled to stand but couldn't manage it. Suddenly, a pair of hands helped me up. It was Logan, looking uncomfortable and apologetic. Sis-in-law, I'm sorry. I really couldn't stop Ethan. He was called into the office by the chief this morning, and he's been like this ever since. I let out a bitter laugh. It's not the first time he's acted this way, is it? Logan tried to reason with Ethan. Ethan, you're in the wrong here. Everyone saw what happened. Her father is still in the hospital. How could you hit her like that? Ethan spat on the ground. Who knows if he's really sick or just faking it? He snapped. His tone completely unhinged. Even Logan's face darkened at that, clearly annoyed. Ethan, the whole hospital knows about this. Why don't you believe it? Are you pretending to be clueless? Or are you really that blind? If you have a shred of decency, you'd go check on your father-in-law right now. Logan said firmly. Ethan froze, clearly not expecting this. For a moment, doubt flickered across his face, but it was quickly replaced by indifference. Even if he's really sick, so what? He's old, doesn't take care of himself, and still drinks. If he didn't end up with a brain hemorrhage, who would? Lily, ever opportunistic, chimed in. Exactly. Meryl, your father's illness isn't Ethan's fault. Besides, Ethan was with me at the hospital yesterday, working hard. People always say he doesn't take his job seriously. As she spoke, she reached out to gently stroke Ethan's face, her actions intimate and unashamed. The two of them stood close, as if I didn't exist. Ethan straightened his clothes and looked at me with a sneer. Stop pretending to be the victim. You promised me marriage would bring me a promotion. And look at me now. Still just a traffic cop with no real position. Meryl, everything your father's going through, he brought on himself. I licked the blood from my lips, nodding slowly. You're right, Ethan. It's all my fault. Thinking I was giving in, Ethan's voice grew louder and more arrogant. Let me tell you this. You'd better figure out a way to get me a higher position. And I want your mother to apologize to me for what she did. Looking at his smug expression, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. An apology? Shouldn't you be the one apologizing? You were the one who approached me. But you've been spreading lies that I used my family's influence to force you into marriage. You deleted Lily's contact yourself, but then claimed I forced you to. I used to think it wasn't worth explaining, that I could just focus on our family. But now, it seems necessary. Hearing this, Lily abruptly let go of Ethan's hand. Wait, what? Ethan, didn't you tell me she forced you to delete my contact? And that she coerced you into sleeping with her? You said you felt dirty and had no choice but to marry her. Ethan's face changed colors rapidly, but he stammered. Well, none of that matters now, does it? He turned to me, his expression hardening. What's the point of bringing this up now? Meryl, you've wasted so much of my time. How are you going to make it up to me? Before you, I felt free with Lily. But you just disgust me. His venomous words left me rooted to the spot, unable to move. Why did he hate me so much? I stared at him for a long moment before pulling a folded document from my bag. If you're so disgusted, then let's end this, I said, handing him the divorce papers. Ethan took the papers, his expression shifting as he read the words, divorce agreement. He looked back at me, his gaze suddenly complex. You're serious? I couldn't understand why he seemed hesitant now. After everything. Of course. After the divorce, all property will be split evenly. I won't take anything more than what's fair. And anything given by my father, cars, houses, must be returned. Ethan looked flustered by my calm demeanor. Meryl, this doesn't seem like you. Are you putting on an act? Or do you have some hidden plan? I glanced at Lily, who stood to the side with a triumphant smirk. Ethan, I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. Why don't you believe it? Ethan's expression darkened as he replied. Fine, I'll agree to the divorce. But only if your mother apologizes to me and withdraws the report. I stared at him, incredulous. You're dreaming. Turning to Lily, I added, I hear you've been struggling with mental health issues. Lily, I've arranged for a top doctor to evaluate you. It's the least I can do. Lily panicked, shaking her head quickly. That won't be necessary. I'm fine now. Her overly defensive reaction was starkly different from her usual demeanor. In my past life, she had constantly used her condition as an excuse to pull Ethan away from me. But now, she seemed completely unaffected. Ethan stepped protectively in front of Lily, his face dark with anger. Meryl, if you dare touch her, I'll make sure you regret it. I met his glare without flinching. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Go ahead and try, I said coldly. Before I could say anything more, Ethan's gaze suddenly shifted past me, his expression turning nervous and ingratiating. Captain, what brings you here? The police captain furrowed his brows, looking at Ethan with a mix of confusion and authority. I should be asking you that. I told you to handle your resignation papers. What are you doing here? Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment, but he couldn't hide his unwillingness. It was just a mistake. I can change. Why do you have to fire me? The captain's voice was icy. If something had gone seriously wrong, the entire department would have been in jeopardy. Do you even understand that? As he spoke, his gaze shifted to me, his eyes lighting up with recognition. Miss Meryl. He walked over quickly. His previously stern demeanor now softened with apology. It's been a chaotic few days. I should have come to check on Mr. Merrill sooner. I forced a faint smile. My father should be awake now. It's a good time for you to have a word with him. I'm sure he'd be happy to see you. Ethan's face darkened as he stood there, watching the exchange. After a long silence, he tentatively asked, Captain, are you here too? The captain's expression turned even colder. Who else? If it weren't for the mess you caused, Mr. Merrill wouldn't have been in this situation. Honestly, you should be kneeling at his bedside, begging for forgiveness. The captain's anger visibly shook Ethan. After a long pause, he sighed and said to me, Miss Merrill, part of the blame lies with me. Your father brought up Ethan's work, hoping I could push for a promotion, but regulations are strict, and there wasn't much I could do immediately. I never imagined things would spiral like this. It's my fault he ended up drinking so much that day. Ethan's face went pale, and he seemed to waver on his feet. Captain, what do you mean? What promotion? He asked hesitantly. The captain shot him a withering glance. Your father-in-law asked me to help get you promoted, but given how many times you've abandoned your post for Lily over the years, it wasn't an easy case to push. Your father-in-law didn't want to publicize it, so he kept quiet. But you. After the captain left, Ethan stood there, his face ashen as if seeing me for the first time. Meryl, he started, his voice shaky. Before he could finish, Lily let out a startled cry, clutching her chest and collapsing into his arms. Ethan, I feel so faint, she whimpered. I grabbed Lily's arm with a sardonic smile. Perfect timing. We're in a hospital. Let's have a doctor check you out. Despite her protests, I dragged Lily to the psychology department. The doctor, after a quick examination, said flatly, You're perfectly healthy. Just avoid stress and take care of yourself. Still unconvinced, I pulled up an image on my phone and handed it to the doctor. Take a look at this medical record. It was a photo Ethan had once sent me to prove Lily's condition. The doctor glanced at it briefly and dismissed it. This is fake. You can buy these online. Lily's face turned ghostly pale as her long-kept secret unraveled before her eyes. She stammered. No. I just wanted to see you, Ethan. That's all. But Ethan's expression had already hardened. So, when you said you were feeling suicidal and needed me to skip work to be with you, that was a lie too. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she begged. Ethan, I didn't mean it. I just wanted to see you. Is that so wrong? Ethan's voice shook with anger. Then why did you lie to me? The weight of the revelations crushed him. His hands trembled as he pointed at her. I gave up everything for you because I cared about you. And this is how you repay me. Before Ethan could spiral further, Logan appeared, holding a stack of documents. Ethan, you might want to look at this. Miss Merrill asked me to investigate. Ethan snatched the papers and began reading. His face darkened with each page until he exploded. Explain this. Lily, confused and panicking, tried to play innocent. What are you talking about? What did I do? Ethan slammed the papers onto the table. You told me you came back from abroad because you missed me. Turns out, you were kicked out for being someone's mistress. You ran away when they found out. Didn't you? Lily froze, her face turning white as all her lies unraveled. When she had returned, her first move had been to find Ethan and tearfully confess she couldn't adapt to life abroad and missed him terribly. In truth, she had been exposed as a mistress overseas and had no choice but to flee. Ethan, now fully grasping the situation, looked devastated. He had spent years cleaning up her messes, even paying off her debts and helping her settle back in the country. Lily, one lie leads to countless others. Haven't you learned that by now? I said coldly. Lily crumpled to the floor. As if unable to process what was happening, her cries echoed through the hospital hallway. But Ethan didn't spare her a glance. Don't expect me to check on you. We're done. For good. He spat. Lily's pleas grew more hysterical, her voice reaching a fever pitch. You're no better. You used me to. You just wanted to keep the title of the chief's son-in-law. I closed my eyes, hiding the bitterness welling up inside me. The extent of their betrayal had gone beyond anything I could have imagined. Get out of my sight, Ethan roared, finally breaking. Lily stumbled out, her cries fading into the distance. Now, only Ethan and I remained in the hallway. He wrung his hands awkwardly, clearly at a loss. Meryl, he began hesitantly. I couldn't believe it. My father had ended up like this because of me. Ethan, after hesitating for a long moment, suddenly slapped himself hard across the face. I was wrong, he said, his voice trembling. From now on, I'll take care of your father. You won't have to worry about a thing. We'll live a good life together. Okay, I'll love you for the rest of my life. I'll never see Lily again. For a moment, his expression seemed sincere, but I knew better. Most likely, this sudden remorse stemmed from the fact that he'd lost his job. I pulled away from his grasp, adjusting my disheveled clothing. His hopeful gaze followed me as I leaned in close to his ear and whispered, When you stabbed me in the heart in our last life, did it feel satisfying? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his expression freeze, his face going pale. You've been reborn too, he stammered, his voice filled with shock. Without answering, I turned and walked away, leaving him rooted to the spot. I arranged to have my father transferred to another hospital to avoid Ethan bothering us. At the same time, I provided evidence to a trusted journalist about how Ethan had prevented me from getting my father to the hospital in time. The story spread like wildfire online, and the public outrage was immense. Faced with intense public scrutiny, the police department quickly severed all ties with Ethan, and Logan was also disciplined. I moved back into my parents' home to care for my father. Slowly, his health improved, and his voice regained its strength. One day, as I prepared the divorce papers, he sighed. Well, at least this whole ordeal let us see people for who they really are. Not a total loss. Right. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Ethan, begging for reconciliation and pleading with me to retract the reports. Unable to find work due to the backlash, he had been reduced to taking odd jobs to make ends meet. On the day of the divorce, Ethan showed up. His haggard appearance and forced smile did nothing to mask the shadows in his eyes. Meryl, he said cautiously, I think we should talk. I scoffed. Talk? What's left to talk about? Unless you're planning to die once, like I did in our last life. There's nothing to say. Ethan's face went blank, and he fell silent. The divorce papers were signed without further argument. Later, I heard that Ethan had gone mad. He reportedly stormed into a market, grabbed a butcher knife, and stabbed himself in the heart, dying instantly. What a pity. He should have suffered more.